Analog versus digital.
Dude, do we have to talk about this?
Yeah, man. Please. People are asking for that, man.
It's just such a tired conversation.
I know, but just go, man. Just you can do it.
Okay.
Let's get into it. Tip of the day. Well, it is now the end of 2020, and the conversation is still a hot SEO topic. We actually searched the SEO on this, and it's how much is, like, what are you seeing on search results for analog versus digital, Will?
Like
thousands of searches a month, analog versus digital. It's not just gear sluts, right? You guys think oh dude, this is a stupid conversation. People are searching this like crazy still in 2020, okay? So let's talk about it. Analog versus digital. What does that even mean, right? I think nowadays they're almost synonymous. It's almost saying you're like, oh, analog or digital. Is it all analog? Or is it all digital? Or is it all, because most stuff now is kind of a hybrid. So behind me, I have the UAD stuff, right? I want to break this down a little bit because I think the analog versus digital thing, this conversation started from the idea of recording to an analog medium versus recording to a digital medium, okay? So recording to tape, recording to cassette even, right? Anything that's completely analog, recording to wax cylinder, directly to vinyl, right? You're talking about the actual analogous, I don't know how to say that, but the analog, same, you're not sampling it with a sampling rate. You're not taking pictures of something and representing it, right? It's actually there. It's physically analog. So that's like printing and tape. That's moving magnets around. That's, scratching into vinyl, an actual groove that a needle then amplifies. That's analog. It's real, right? And then we're talking about a digital medium where you're sampling it using something like Pro Tools, goes through an A to D converter, right? So it converts it to zeros and ones. It prints a sample, a photograph, a sampling of that thing. It's not real. It's zeros and ones. A digital representation of what that sound is, what that picture is, what that movie is, etc. All right? Now, in modern technology, we're using hybrids of all this stuff, okay? I want that idea to come across really well. Now, either way, it's zeros and ones on the computer. Once it's hit the computer, it's zeros and ones. But the algorithms and the sampling and the amount of data that we can collect, it's almost like it is completely analog. Because the brain, it goes beyond the perception of the human brain and the hearing and the seeing, the sight, all that stuff, to where the brain is just tricked because it's so highly sampled that it's analog in a sense. And I hope that makes sense because this shit gets really deep. But with the UAD stuff, for example, we're talking about a hybrid of analog and digital because there's analog pieces to this gear. The preamp is analog, right? Then there's digital stuff that happens within the preamp. So we're actually using modeling technology to model different preamplifiers in the 88RS from Neve to the 1073 to the UA610. So they can actually take the impedance and they can match the impedance and they can have the computer and the digital signal processing working together with the analog bits and components of the signal flow, the capacitors, the transformers within the unit, all that stuff. So we're getting to a point now where analog and digital are blending so well together that it's almost imperceivable. And I think that there's a lot of proof on this. I think that you could probably mix in the box, record in the box a whole album of stuff and use UAD plugins and use plugins. And if your ear's good enough, you could trick the most discerning listener, the best mixing engineer in the world, mastering engineer in the world, and trick them into thinking that you did some sort of analog processing on it because the plugins are so well sampled, really, right? So we're modeling all the analog components. Now let's talk about kind of the benefits of that and the downfall of it. What's so good about digital, what's so good about analog, right? Analog to me is tactile, right? So people love to touch buttons. And when you're finding the sweet spot in compression or EQ or a signal processor of any sort on the analog medium, it has a way of like responding to certain amounts of voltage, right? That digital still hasn't caught up with. It's getting there. We're getting to the point where digital plugins are actually like have sweet spots now, right? Because they've modeled the analog components so well. But there's something about the tactile, like, you know, knobs and putting all buttons in on 1176 and getting this like sound out of it that just feels different for us. And analog also is noisier. It's always going to be noisier because it has actual analog components, right? It has capacitors in it. It has, you know, transistors in it. It has things that can fail, that can get noisy, pan pots that can get noisy, all these things that can actually, you can get noise in the signal from. Digital is a lot cleaner, and we can bring in noise as we want. Things like Waves plugins, they actually model the noise of analog gear, but a lot of that is just like turning on 50 hertz or 60 hertz cycles, and it's just going, you know, so that can be kind of annoying. I usually turn that off. But the UA stuff, I find a lot of it can sound very analog. I can trick a lot of people. I can trick myself into thinking it's analog. So I like the digital idea because we're kind of losing the limits of how much outboard gear, right, we need, and the expense of outboard is so high. So there's benefits and there's like good and bad to each side, right? Analog world, everything's going to be a little bit more custom. It's going to have flaws in it, so it's going to give you a sound and a texture that you just can't get out of a plugin. Everyone's got the UAD stuff, right? If you got the Wave stuff, if you got the same plugins, you're using the same exact thing as everybody else. If you got this analog piece of gear, it doesn't matter if you have serial number 1 of an 1176 or serial number 3050 of an 1176. They're going to sound completely different. And they're going to have different sweet spots, and they're going to hit different, and they're all buttons in, it'll sound a little different. Everything's going to be a little bit more unique because of the non-linearities. And that's why the human brain loves analog, because if you get on a console, every single channel is just a little bit different, which actually brings us depth and width and a lot more time, like spatial placement stuff, because you're getting distortion and harmonics in different channels and different non-linearities of the channels, right? With digital, you just don't get that. They're trying to model that, and they're doing a pretty good job with it, but it's still not there, right? So that's kind of like the benefits. But then, dude, to get all that analog gear to, just so you can get the non-linearities, I mean, you better have, hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend. So these are kind of the ups and downs of it. So analog versus digital, for me, I prefer to work in the box when I'm mixing and mastering. I have to move fast. My clients demand it. We need revisions to be done quickly. I work on anything from EDM and dance records to pop records to trap records to rock records to singer-songwriter to orchestral stuff. I need to be able to move really quickly, and a lot of this stuff, it needs to be very low noise floor. I need to be able to recall things instantly, and as the time gets quicker and quicker, I think that's kind of the realm for us working in the professional realm. But then there's always the artist side. Like if I was working on my own album, I would want to use analog. I would want to mess around, and I want to be an artist, and I want to throw paint at the wall. And I don't care that it's going to take longer. I want to find my own sound. So here at Radium, we use a cross of both. We use custom analog gear that we've sourced, and we use plugins and UAD and Waves and OEK sound and Slate digital plugins. We use all the plugins, and we use some custom analog. So we want to get our own sound, but we also want our workflow to be really tight. So that's kind of where the world is right now for, I think, probably most top engineers as well. The ones like working on the Grammy and Oscar and the platinum record, stuff. Those guys are going to be doing a lot of hybrid stuff, but a lot of them are moving to, all in the box mixing, and then they'll have maybe a mastering chain that they go out of or they monitor through, things like that. So that's about it. That's the debate on it. And as things shift and change, I think the analog gear is going to get better. It's going to become more digital for recall and things that matter, noise floor, all that. And I think that the digital stuff's going to become, more analog, as you're seeing with like UAD coming out with Luna, their DAW. And I know this is a really long tip of the day, but this is a really deep subject. And this conversation, I think, will go on for another 100 years, to be honest. Now, if you really like this and you're really thinking about going into deeper into this conversation, we can do some mentoring calls, right? So you can do an hour with me, you can do 2 hours, we can do Skype, we can do whatever. I want to talk to you, I want to connect with you, I want to have these conversations, maybe give you some recommendations on what kind of gear you can get for your home studio, your project studio, or even a commercial studio, as I have set up and installed multiple commercial studios. So click that link in the description and let's get on a call. Let's make some stuff happen. And thanks for tuning in. Like it, comment, share it, and keep the conversation going. I want to hear your arguments for what do you like, analog or digital? Pop it in the comments. Let's chat. All right, that's the tip of the day, almost every day.